Hi
Hey Al.
everybody, Al Spath here, Poker Insider. I'm here with Gene Hull today from Las Vegas, Nevada. He's a coach and a poker author, among a host of other things, and he's going to be talking with us today during the Sunday conversation. Gene, are you there in Vegas?
I'm here, Al. Good morning. Good
Good morning
afternoon, I
to
should
you,
say. Huh?
sir. How are you?
Great.
You're not digging out from a snowstorm like we are here in the East, are you?
This will sound strange, but I wish I was. I love the snow.
Do you really?
I love it. The deeper, the better. Yeah.
Is that because you originally from the Virginia, I think it was. Let me see here. It's Virginia and Baltimore area. You got some Baltimore connections, don't you?
I do. I grew up most of my life in Baltimore and started skiing, I guess, at about the age of 9 at Wisp Ski Resort in Western Maryland
Yes.
and raced in college. And I guess I'm a powder hound. I love the powder. Anything over 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet. After 4 feet, it starts getting a little bit too deep, but I love it. I hate the wind. I like deep powder on sunny blue days with no wind. So I
Yeah.
know you guys had, 40, 50 mile an hour winds, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, we've got some big drifts. I've got some drifts right outside my front door, 6 and 7 feet tall, and up on my deck, on my slider in the back. I posted some pictures up on Facebook. It's 3/4 of the sliding glass door. It's just buried because it all blew up against there. So, we're logged in and we're ready to go for a whole couple of days without getting out of the house. Um, but let's talk about you. Enough about snow. I'm cold enough here without reminding myself about it. What brought you to Vegas?
Well, poker brought me here. My dad introduced me to poker when I think I was about 9
Uh huh.
or 10, and we just played 5 card draw, 5 card stud, 7 card stud with pennies, and I loved it. And up until I was probably in my mid 30s, poker was just kind of a hobby. I'd get together and do it with the friends on the weekends. 5 or 6 times a year, not a lot, but just for fun. And it was when I was about 35, 36, we got a home game started, and it was just before the moneymaker effect in 2003.
Uh huh.
And that was when poker really became an interest for me, and I started studying. And I had always just relied kind of my intuitive sense on, the other players in the game, a general sense of what are good hands and what are bad hands. And I did decent back then, but once I discovered a few books and that there was a really methodical, kind of technical or scientific method to go about really understanding what's going on in the game, I took it very serious and started reading books. And about a year into starting to study the game, I decided to go out to Vegas and test myself. So for 2 summers, I came out for about 4 weeks each summer
Mm-hmm.
just to see how I would do in Vegas, and I did fine. Just playing the one to no limit. I basically would pay for my trip. I'd win $800, $900 in a week playing 60, 70 hours, which was decent, but not great.
No.
So I decided to move out to Vegas. And it's funny, though, as soon as I moved out to Vegas and decided to play 40 hours a week, I realized I didn't want to play 40 hours a week.
Oh.
And that was when I started the Poker Hoodie business. You can see the logo in the back there,
Uh
which is
huh.
a table cover.
Yeah, we're gonna get
So
into that. We're gonna get into that.
yeah. So that's what got me out to Vegas, and I just love the lifestyle out here. I love the weather. Mount Charleston's just 40 minutes away, so I still get the snow. I went skiing a couple weeks ago for 2 days. And the western states just have so much to offer as far as the outdoor life, and it's inexpensive to live in Vegas. The food's great. I met my new girlfriend out here, who I just started business with. So I'm coming up aces out here in Vegas. I love it.
Well, listen, we have some viewers that are listening and watching today. Well, when they come to Vegas and they need a hairstylist and they need to go guess what's the name of that place? Let's put a plug in.
Hair Cosmos, and we're at the corner of Rainbow, South Rainbow, and Tropicana on the northwest corner. Come and see us. We're easy to find. Those are two pretty main boulevards in Vegas. Would love to have you out, and you get a great haircut.
There
Tell them
you
I
go.
sent you, and we'll give you a deal.
There you go. Mention Gene Hull when you go in the door. He was on the Poker Insider here on the Sunday Conversation, and they'll take care of you, folks. That's right there in Vegas off of Rainbow. Now, listen, Gene, you're going to have to move a little bit to the side here because I want to show the folks what's up on your wall there. That's
Okay.
that big old sign up there that says Poker Hoodie. Explain to everybody that's listening what a poker hoodie is exactly.
Okay. Well, it started. I was back visiting in Virginia. I guess about 6.5 years ago, and all my friends were working during the week, and I was sitting on the couch, thinking I needed to do something different than play poker full time. And I was thinking and thinking, and the idea came to me pretty quick. And I was looking at the dining room table and said, "There's got to be a better way than putting a blanket on there." So I started thinking about a fitted sheet for a bed, and then a hoodie that goes over your head with the pull strings, and it kind of all came together. It's a neoprene table cover with a bungee cord in the hem, so you can tighten it up, and it conforms to your table. It's kind of like dive suit material. It's about 3 millimeters thick, so it's pretty thick. So
Mm-hmm.
the cards slide really nice on the polyester material, and because of the neoprene, it's got a nice soft bounce for the chips, so they land quietly and it protects your table. And it took me about a year to prototype, get the website going, explore different manufacturers, and kind of bring it up to full speed. But I've been running that business for about 6 years now, and it earns me a pretty decent living. I guess every 5 or 6 years, I don't necessarily get bored with what I'm doing, but I find the need to explore a new interest. And as we talk more about poker, that'll come up. I think I'm more of an adventurer and an explorer and maybe a teacher than a poker player. I love not knowing what's going to happen, not in the sense of like a gambler sense, but I love trying to figure out anything. What might happen? What's the probability? How do I make this work? And I guess I've been able to work on that and to have some success, some moderate success with both business and poker, and now writing books and coaching.
Now, how would they get the poker hoodie? Is that pokerhoodie.com?
Yep. Search pokerhoodie.com, POKERHOODY.com. My website will pop right up. And we've got round ones, rectangular ones. The rectangular ones will fit an oval table. Once you tighten them down, they'll conform. We've made them for tables as long as 10 feet and 6 feet wide. We do custom units. They can get a little expensive, but the ones on the site range anywhere from 40 to about $150. The more expensive ones are for the larger tables, and they're multi-tone with a racetrack center and different player zones. And it's a really inexpensive way to convert your table into a really professional playing surface, and you can move your game up to a whole new level. Your friends will love them.
That's great. And I also noticed here on the camera shot, I asked you to put the poker book up there, and Poker Knows. This is Gene's book that he has out, and two of our guests today, a little later on in a chat here on the Twitch channel, are going to be given a Kindle edition of Poker Knows, and so. Call your friends. Tell them right now if you're listening to this live, and tell them to get into Twitch and start asking some questions for later on. And we're going to give away a couple of those books. But let's talk about that book for just a second. What really fired you up to put pen to paper and write this? I read 40 pages. You sent it to me the other day. I have to tell you, because I had the blizzard, I didn't get to finish it. It's about 220, something like that, pages on the
Yep.
Kindle. That's how it works. But I'll bring up some points on some subjects I talked about. But what got you to do this?
Well, there's a group I participate out here in Vegas, and we'll talk more about them. But
Yes.
it's the Las Vegas, the Wednesday Poker Discussion Group.
Yep.
And it was funny. A friend of mine who played in Virginia, an excellent player. He used to clean our wallets out every week, and he got me a couple times. I would have to win what I lost to him back from the other players, but I learned to avoid him. And I ran into him out here in Vegas, and he told me about this discussion group that met on Wednesdays, and then there was a Monday group that doesn't meet anymore, but it was connected to the Wednesday group. And I've been going to that group steadily for 3 or 4 years. And a part of that group also emails, and we have lots of very dynamic and enthusiastic chats online. It's so hard to get everybody to agree on stuff, which is great because you get so many other perspectives.
Sure.
So I guess through blogging and writing emails and essays over maybe 2 years, I realized I had all these essays that I had written, and I had some, I guess what I would call some pseudo fans, people that enjoyed reading them and participating in the discussions. And a lot of those folks are actually part of the essays. They help me write them. Even what I like to say is that my greatest critics are my best motivators. They help me to really refine my ideas and write them in a way that's more understandable for folks. So after a couple years of doing all that writing, I decided to take a creative writing class just for fun, and I loved it. I didn't realize how much I would love writing poetry. It's a really concise way to deliver a big message and do it creatively. So the combination of that led me to deciding to write a book. And initially, I was going to write a book which was kind of going to be an assembly of all the essays that I'd written.
Sure.
And I realized quickly that the best way to write a book is to not compile all your old work, but to start all over and let that old work kind of come in through your new writing. So a lot of the stuff I'd written about is in the book, but I had written it in a new way. And I learned a lot about myself. It's my first book. I learned a lot about poker. Some new questions came up that I asked about the game, and I found out that I had to explore those things more, both through research and meditation, and really thinking about them to write about them. And it allowed me to add some new twists. The book I would almost say it's not a book about poker. It's a book about how to succeed, about how to win, about how not to get yourself in the way. It's really a philosophy book that blends poker. I've even got some quantum mechanics in there, and I couldn't help but at the end of the book, I'd realized that it had a theme of a little bit of Alice in Wonderland, kind of this idea of I've done this before. I did it over and over and over, and in the end of the book, you'll read that as I described the finish of the book, that every time I went back to rewrite the book, I was a different person by then. So the book read different to me, and the changes kept continuing and continuing. So it's not as technical of a book as a lot of other books. There are a lot of technical charts and math in there. I don't really shy away from that. But the book's really about helping the player understand that if they want to succeed, the main thing they have to do is just start heading in that direction and then don't stop. Sure, you can take breaks, but the main thing for me, at least, in succeeding, is to just not stop, take breaks along the way, and to realize that a lot of the obstacles that we paint are not the obstacles that we find. The obstacles really, for me at least, the sense of struggle. And once you can learn to kind of get a hold on that sense that develops, that's where tilt comes from. Why didn't this work out? How did this person hit that two-outer when they shouldn't have? And not struggling with that, but just kind of releasing that feeling back, just like the breath when you meditate, and moving on. And if you just keep going, I know there's a saying, if to eat an elephant, you just go one bite at a time. And there's a lot of truth to that, and that's not in the book, but somebody shared that with me, and it fits perfectly. So that's kind of what got me to writing, and I'm working on a couple of other books, a couple of poker books, one about bluffing, and I'm also working on some other non-poker books, which tie a lot of this idea of self-improvement and commitment to continuing the journey and not giving up on what you believe. Anything's possible, and this is from Alice in Wonderland. A lot of things are improbable, but nothing's impossible. And I genuinely believe anything you can think of, you can do if you put your mind to it and you don't stop.
That's a good philosophy, and I know that we have a lot of listeners out there that can give you a lot of insight on how to bluff because I've seen some of them try. Listen, we're bringing this to you on Heartbeat Poker. Those of you that are listening today on YouTube or on social media, please follow Heartbeat Poker. Go into Twitch TV and follow Heartbeat Poker. You can find me at Al Spath, it's all one word as well, and follow me there. But Heartbeat Poker is the one that's presenting this, and next week we'll have Matt Savage on, so you don't want to miss that one as well. But today we have Gene Hull, and he's talking about Poker Knows, and I was reading it, like I said, about 40 pages in because I just got it, folks. It's not because it's a bad read, it's a good read. And the thing that struck me the most in the first 40 pages was the Taekwondo, the karate reference that you use, and talking about players and assigning them different belts, giving them
Yes.
a white belt and giving them a green belt and a black belt. And would you just briefly, we don't want to labor it and everything, but go over it, how you categorize players and put them into these different belts as they're starting out?
Sure. Well, one of the things I had seen other writers do in their books was create an easier way to classify players. Now, there's probably a million different classifications for players, but that's too many. So you kind of need to break it down into a manageable level. And I've never really studied martial arts to any great degree, but I've studied a little bit. I've been to a few classes and read about it. I enjoy the philosophy of it more than the actual physicality of it. And what I tried to do was to just break apart the different levels of the game where most people find themselves as they evolve. And of course, the white belt is the beginner. That's the person who's basically trying to figure out the essence of what hands beat what's a full house, how the game rolls. And as you move up in different, green, brown, and on up to black belt, which is expert level, you start encountering different players at different skill levels. And the idea is to be able to identify, if everybody wore their belts at the poker table, you would be able to pick your games perfectly. Because if you were a brown belt, you would just go find a table with all green belts and white belts, and you would win. The main secret to winning at poker is playing bad players, and I don't mean that in a condescending or a negative way, but you have to play players that you're better than. I know a lot of our listeners have probably heard this. If you're the 10th best player in the world, you're incredibly good. But if you're playing the 9 best players, you're not going to win. You may have a night where you win, but you just won't win in the long term. So being able to have some methodology to classify players at different skill levels, I thought was important, and that was just a kind of a metaphorical way or an analogous way to put it in the book for the readers to understand. Another thing that comes up when you start putting the levels of players is what I call play it safe poker, or I call it the safe zone. And usually, I can't remember exactly where it would fall into the green and the brown belts, but there's a lot of aspects to poker that I teach my students when they're starting out. What I tell a lot of them is find reasons to fold. Don't look for hands to play, but look for any reason you can think of to fold. And when you can't find a reason to fold, then play.
Raise
Okay,
and
and
raise.
what's that?
And
Or
raise.
raise. Or yeah, exactly. Now, well, no, the first thing is finding a reason to fold. And if you can't find a reason, then play. And when you play, raise. Play aggressively.
That's right.
And what that does is it keeps people from getting into these situations they're not ready for yet, because they're not a brown belt or a green belt. They're just a white belt. It allows them to stay at the table and observe and to learn and not lose a lot of money. And as they begin to learn more about the game, about how to play the opponents and manage the variance of the cards, they can begin to play more situations. But the learning pot odds, how often you'll get aces, how often somebody at the table will get aces or make a set, those are fairly easy things to learn. But once you start getting into the bluffing zone, where you're betting without cards, or you're trying to pick off a bluff, those parts of the game, they start to get uncomfortable for some folks, which is a great thing. Al Schoonmaker talks about a lot of that in his book, about how vulnerability and doing things that are outside of your comfort zone will
Which
make you
book?
younger.
Which book? Which book are you referring to? Is that your
Play
worst poker
poker or
ever?
stay young.
Oh, that's his new Kindle book. What was
He's
the
got a
title
new
on that
Kindle
one
book
again?
out. It's Play Poker, Stay Young.
Okay.
And
Does he
yep,
cover that in Your Worst Poker Enemy or The Psychology of Poker, two of his other books?
he covers a little bit of it, but he really covers it in his newest book. And he gives a lot of great advice on how to win at poker,
Uh huh.
but he also kind of expands on how poker, because it's so dynamic with all the situations that can come up, you're always trying to figure out something new.
Right.
And that process can basically grow new neural pathways in your brain. He calls it neuroplasticity. And you know when you're moving up in skill level and in the challenges that you're facing, and you're running into these more difficult opponents,
Yes.
it becomes uncomfortable. And I call that when you're getting out of the safe zone. So if you're not getting out of the safe zone, then you're not improving your game. And according to Dr. Al, getting out of the safe zone extends your life, because it stimulates the brain to grow new neurons because it's meeting new challenges. So there's a lot that ties in to classifying these levels.
Well, Alan is an old friend of mine, and matter of fact, he introduced me to you, and he said you're gonna like Gene. You guys are gonna hit it off. You guys come from the same cloth. You just guys are just gonna hit it off. I know it. You need to talk to Gene about this. And what you said earlier about when you coach or when you write, you learn. I learned every time I get a new client. and I'm working with, I learn from them as they're learning from me. They bring up something that somebody else may have never brought up before, and I have to use my brain, or I have to go research something because it's something I never thought of, and then we hash it out, and we come up with a great learning experience from it. But you mentioned also before, you got to fail, and what most of the
Yeah,
players don't understand is that failure is the only way to succeed. If you don't fail, then you're not going to change anything, and you're just not going to learn some things. So failure, although it looks like a roadblock because poker is such a long end game, failure is the hurdle in that race that you're getting to the end line. You've got to jump these hurdles. You've got to fall a
right.
little bit. You've got to have something to get you or to spur you on to the next plateau, and that's failure.
I agree. I agree. Now, what I do like to do is replace that word failure with setback.
Setback is
Um,
good.
I think a lot of the, when you're looking at some of the like Jordan Spieth, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, some of these incredible athletes, some of the, who's the swimmer? I can't recall his name right now. He's got 23 gold medals.
Phelps,
Michael
Michael
Phelps.
Phelps,
Yeah. Those
Baltimore.
guys, failure is almost not a word they even know, even though they've had plenty of losses. I know one of my favorite quotes is from Michael Jordan, where he says, "I've missed 3,000 shots. I've missed the game-winning shot when it was my opportunity to win 15 times, and it's because of all those failures that he succeeds."
That's why he's got
And
6 titles.
yeah, oh yeah, he's Michael Jordan's one of my favorites. So one of my favorite quotes, this is you'll get a kick out of this, is he's on the golfing tee with another golfer, and the golfer says to Michael Jordan, says, "Well, how much are we going to play for?" And Michael Jordan says, "Well, how much makes you uncomfortable?" So there's a lot of wisdom in that when you're looking to gamble with somebody and get their money. It's a lot of it's just who's more comfortable in the situation, so they can really perform at peak.
That's true. I remember, and I've told the story before about Lee Trevino. Before he was a pro and he was on the circuit and everything, he used to be the I guess the golf pro at a local course in El Paso, Texas, and he used to play these big high rollers that would come in and they would play. And he said, "I'll tell you what's stressful. It's stressful when you're putting it's a $15,000 putt on the last hole, and you don't have $15,000 in your pocket to pay
Yeah,
the bet.
that's stressful.
That's stressful."
You better have your running shoes handy if you miss, right?
Well, you only have to outrun one, right?
So,
So listen, one other thing, Alan was the one that also introduced me to the Poker Wednesday group with Jan
yes,
Fisher. I think Linda
Linda
Johnson was
Johnson.
there. Roy West, who writes a great 7-card stud introductory book
Yep,
called 42 Lessons with Roy West. That's a great book, folks. If you haven't got that, I understand that Roy's been under the weather the last couple of months, though.
he has. But he's been doing all right. Roy's gotten up in years, but he still keeps going and follows us. So he doesn't get to the meetings as much, but he still does. But he's fairly active on our emails.
Okay.
And we're friends on Facebook. We've got another Roy. Roy Cook also attends our
Oh,
meetings, and a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with his columns in Card Player magazine. He's been a limit player most of his, I think, 30 years. He's been playing poker. I don't want to
absolutely.
misquote that,
Big,
but a
big
long
high
time.
stakes limit.
And he brings a ton of experience and wisdom to the group. But it's interesting because he's now taking up no limit poker, and it's been a lot of fun watching him transition and how some of the things from limit poker transfer over and how some of the things don't transfer over because no limits, it's a different game. My tendency is to think that limit poker is much more mathematical, and no limit is much more psychological. It's you really have to know your opponents in no limit. It's important to know your opponents in any game, but you can't rely on the math as much in no limit poker as you can in limit poker. Math is still a big part of it. Being able to figure out fold equity, pot odds. But I think position becomes even more important in no limit poker than in limit poker because of the size and the magnification of the bets. And probably the biggest difference and why no limit is so different is poker's really not a card game. It's an information game that we play with money. And it's the errors that people make in interpreting that information and how those errors trade. Most of the errors that people make are the same errors that a lot of other players make. in the same situation. So what happens in that scenario is the errors cancel out and the money just trades back and forth. But when the errors don't cancel out and there's errors that one player makes that another player doesn't, that moves money. And no limit poker allows you to amplify those errors by stretching the money. And I use that word in my book. It's actually on the cover in green up here. It's called stretchy money. And no limit poker, you can really stretch the money. Whereas in limit poker, you can just toss the same money out every time. It is nice to know in limit poker how much the next two streets are going to cost you, and you can factor that in. But in no limit poker, you don't know how much it's going to cost you. You know how much it might cost you based on the opponent's chip stack, but you don't know if it's going to cost you $20, $50, or $500 when it's no limit.
That's very true. That's very true. By the way, if anybody's going to Vegas or relocating, Roy Cook is a realtor out there, and you could talk poker as you're looking for houses. He'll love to do that. He's one of the best limit poker players that I've ever met, and along with Barry Tannenbaum. The late Barry Tannenbaum was also a good friend of Alan Schoonmaker's, and he passed, I think, about 2 years ago, and him and Roy would play 30, 60, 40, 80 down at the Bellagio most Fridays and Saturday nights, and hope there was plenty of tourists that would come in there to see how good they were.
Yep.
Is that true?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's true. I wasn't playing with them.
Okay.
I think I was still playing for quarters when they were doing that.
Well, right now, listen, before we give away one of your books, I've got a special sponsor today that came in and contacted me, and that's Dave Summers from over at Poker God Z Gear. That's Poker God, G-O-D-Z Gear.com, and I'm going to put something up on the screen right here for everybody right here. These are the kind of hats and shirts and things like that they sell over there, and he says that if you go over to his Facebook page, and I'm putting that up right now, that's Poker God Z Gear, that's Poker God Z and then a space Gear, and if you like his page and then come back into chat here on Heartbeat Poker and put something into the chat that says you've accomplished that, he's told me that we can give away one of those really nice hats to some viewer today. So if you want to do that, and then we'll get around to giving away a couple of books from Gene here. But that was very nice of Dave to come on board today to give out one of those hats. So check him out, PokerGodZGear.com. And we'll go back to Gene right here with this burning question I have for you.
All right.
First job you ever had?
First job? Oh my gosh, I love that. I can't remember if I was 12 and a half or 13. And before I go into that, I want to say I know Dave from Poker Gods. We met about a year ago, so it's such a small world when these names come up and people that I know. And he also markets my poker hoodies on his website. But my first job was in Indiana, and my grandfather was a farmer. And do you know what a deroger is, or a detasseler?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, my father, when he was young, he was a detasseler, and those are basically usually college kids and high school kids that stand out on the end of a big arm that's extended out over the cornfields, and they pluck the tassels out of the top of the corn when they're trying to crossbreed certain breeds of corn and species to come up with a hybrid that's drought resistant, insect resistant. But in the early part of the summer, kids basically walk through the fields with a shovel, a spade, a small shovel. And we have to walk through, and any corn that's either discolored or taller than the rest, we cut it out and chop the roots off.
Oh, wow.
So when I was 13, I spent 8 hours a day walking through the muddy cornfields from when the corn was about 6 inches tall till it was 6 feet tall, and looking for rogue corn stalks and cutting them out. And the most fond memory I have of that was my first paycheck. I was making $3.35 an hour. That was minimum wage back then. I guess that was around 1979 or somewhere around there. And I got my first check. It was $134. They didn't withhold any taxes. And that check lasted all summer long. I bought milkshakes and Slurpees and frozen sloshy drinks for my cousins and my friends. But my first purchase was to upgrade my handlebars on my BMX bike, and I can remember my grandfather was so upset that I spent $30 on new handlebars and grips, and what was wrong with the ones that were on there. But I basically worked every summer since then through high school and college, and so I've always had a drive to kind of do some work and earn a little bit of income. I didn't really work full time till after college, but I waited tables, worked on the golf course. My dad was a teaching golf professional. He was a PGA pro, so I have a big tie into that, and helped out around the golf course as well.
Well, that's good. That's good. Do you have two cameras there? Because you're looking to the left now. Now, if you look over this other way, then you're looking straight at me.
I'm looking at you now.
Okay, that's
Got
better.
it.
That's a better place to look at and everything else. I see that Rob Gag is the first one to go over to Poker God Z page and like it. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. And for those of you, again, remember you can get Poker Hoodie at pokerhoodie.com from Gene, and you also on Poker Nose. I think you can buy that either at Amazon.com. Maybe you have that on your website as well.
I do. I've got that on my website. There's a link on Poker Hoodie to go directly to the Poker Nose website. And I also offer coaching services either over Skype, over the phone, or if you're in Vegas, we can do it here in your casino. I'm even picking up some of the hair clients at the salon who have bought my book through the marketing of my fabulous girlfriend. And I gave my first lesson yesterday to one of her clients who is a truck driver and trying to learn to earn a little extra income from playing poker. And we had a great session.
Well, that's good.
Thanks.
We're gonna get into that coaching in just a minute, but I got a couple more quick questions for you here. Ultimate job, if you could do anything right now, commissioner of football, what would your ultimate job and fantasy job be right now? Tomorrow, you could step into it.
Backcountry helicopter skiing guide.
Oh my goodness.
That's what I would do. Or whitewater kayaking guide. I'm torn on whether powder skiing or big water kayaking are my favorite things to do. I might lean more towards the kayaking. I did a lot of class 4 and some class 5 kayaking back east, and I love being on the water all day when it's hot out, staying in the cool water, flipping your boat around, figuring out really difficult rapids and how you're going to get down them. And then once you do that, you find a spot right in the middle of this incredible turbulence to spin and stop and play in the water. I'm like a duck in the water. So yeah, I would an adventure guide. That would be my ultimate job. I don't really like doing things for the money. I just like enjoying the moment. And those are powder skiing or big water kayaking or when I lose myself. That's what I'd want to do.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So for those that are listening out here, here's your first test question of the day. If Gene was at the poker table and you just had heard this interview today, and you heard about his analytical style just then about going through the rapids, and you heard about his aggressiveness about going up and doing the ski jumping in the back, with a helicopter, would anybody have an inclination to profile Gene at the table? Would you already have something on your mind on what style of play? I'd just like to see what comes up in chat here, and if you guys would just tell me what kind, and then we'll check in with Gene and see what he says he is. But just based on some of the conversation that we've had today, try to figure out what kind of a player Gene is at the table, and we'll give you some time for that. I hope you don't mind that, Gene. We're going to see if...
No, I love it. I love it.
Okay. This Heartbeat Poker, which is what you're on today on Twitch TV, has provided some other people some streaming opportunities, and they stream during the week. So those that are listening to this, you can follow Heartbeat Poker right now on Twitch TV and be notified when the streamers are on the line. Who's the best poker player you've played against? Not that you've seen, but you've played against.
That I've played against? The truthful answer to that is that I probably don't know who it was because he was so good he hid himself from me. But there was a player that I met playing at MGM, and he gave me some of the best advice that I've ever gotten playing poker. And Tommy Vu was his name. Some of you probably know that name. Asian older fellow. And we were playing at the MGM, playing 2-5. This was probably 5 years ago. And he was playing like a maniac. And winning up and down, down 200,
Yeah.
down 400, up 500, and before you know it, he had $1,500 in chips in front of him. And very nice man. And this was at a point where I still had the nickname the locksmith, where I was playing very solid, uh, managing the odds poker, really sticking to the straight and narrow, not bluffing very much. And I was doing fairly well and had good winnings. But I leaned over and I asked Tommy. I said, Tommy, I think I've learned most of the mathematics and the frequencies of events, and I understand player types and tendencies. And I said, what else do I need to do to take my game to the next level? And he said, you need to trust yourself. And that's been one of the lessons that stuck with me for the longest time, is even when you don't know what to do, just trust yourself and do something. And that's really been a big part of me, just pointing myself in the direction I want to go and just keep going and figuring it out as I go, even sometimes when I don't have a plan. So was he the best player? I don't know, but he had the best advice, and it was the simplest advice of all. So I'll give that one to Tommy.
Okay, we got a couple of guesses here. We said one person says, and I won't tell you who it was until you tell us what you think your
Okay.
own self. Very aggressive, active player is number one. A maniac, aggro aggressive is guess number two. And there's one person said they wanted a little bit more time, and I'm waiting for, I don't know if he's
Okay.
still here, Ronster, or anybody else that has some indication on what Gene would be at the table. And then I'll even give my guess, because I don't know Gene other than talking with him, so I'll give him my guess as well. But I want to see some more guesses from there, and we'll get back to you guys in just a minute on that. So let's talk about that coaching style of yours. Let's say Al Spath is in town, or Al Spath is back here in Maryland. He wants to contact you, and he wants to set up some kind of coaching with you. How do I go about doing both online or live? What's my first
Okay.
step?
Well, the first step would just be to contact me through email, and you can easily do that through my website. You can email me at Gene, at pokerhoodie.com. That transfers to all of my other emails, so I'll get that. And so finding me is pretty easy. We could either do it over the phone, over Skype. I do go back to Baltimore several times a year. I recently played at the Horseshoe and at Maryland Live. So I'm for you, Al. If you want a lesson, I'm just kidding. I'll be back in Maryland several times this year. So and we're gonna at least get together and have a meal when I'm back visiting.
We talked about going to Maryland
Yeah.
Live or the Horseshoe, and we're gonna see who's gonna give who a lesson.
Oh yeah. Okay. See, that's the first thing. See, is know your opponent and or your student. But typically, how I go about teaching is I don't really like to say, all right, here's what you need to know and start teaching that. I like to find out, what the students' goals are. Do they want to have fun so that they can, survive in their home game with their buddies? Are they trying to earn extra income? What's their goal? Do they just want to earn $5 or $10 an hour, or do they want to take their game up, to the higher levels? So the first session is really me getting to know them, and I usually start off with a short interview, and then I hit them with a pop quiz. It probably won't be a pop quiz for any of our listeners now because they know I'm going to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 20 questions. It really helps me assess how much they know about the game, how they think psychologically about the game and about themselves. And then we take it from there. And most students need help with the technical aspects. They need to tighten up their understanding of how often things happen. Pot odds, how to figure out money odds versus card odds, and how you manage those in a way that you can collect expected value. And then the psychological side is a little bit more nebulous to work on, and the improvements that I help students with in that regard mostly come from the homework that they do on studying themselves. One of the things I talk about in my book is once you master yourself, everything else is a piece of cake. And for me, that works, and I think it works for a lot of folks that I coach. The technical aspects can be difficult, but they're fairly simple, and I use a lot of what I call fast math. I teach students kind of the combinatorics of how to actually figure out the precise math, but half the folks might not even know what that word is. I'd forgotten what it was until a few years ago, and then I remembered, oh yeah, I remembered that from probability and statistics class in college. But combinatorics is a big tool to figure out the precise math, but there's a lot of very fast ways to figure out the odds of this happening and the odds of that happening. And you had mentioned in a previous discussion that you have a lot of students go home and deal out 10 hands, 20 or 30 times, and look at the cards
Face up.
and face up, right, and pick the hand they would want to play. And they're not really learning what hand they would want to play. They're just seeing how bad all the cards are. So one of the things I try and teach, and I've adopted that now to my students, that same little homework assignment, is I try and help the students develop a landscape in their mind or a map of how often things happen. How often will you get aces? How often will you get a pocket pair? How often when you have a pocket pair will you make a set? And then transferring that into the 9-handed or 10-handed game level, where how often will somebody at the table get aces, or how often will they make a set? So if you know that in a 9 or 10-handed game, one player will randomly make a set every 40 minutes or so, you can start to build a landscape in your mind of how often things are not happening. Because what's happening in poker, and your little exercise really points out, is most of the time people have unplayable hands. They actually have more playable situations than they have hands, but that's getting into that uncomfortable zone of playing the situation and the players versus playing good cards. But most of the time, poker is really about managing those situations when your opponents don't have anything. Because when they don't have anything, you don't need to have anything to win those pots. Now, they're going to get wise to you if you're winning all of those pots, because they realize at some point, well, they must be getting the same bad cards I'm getting. Initially, they think, well, they must just be getting lucky. But after a while, they realize, no, they're just playing more hands, and they're outplaying me. So that understanding of how often things are not happening, how bad the general cards are most of the time for most players, allows you to add a few more spots where you can bluff. And just bluffing a few times in a session over 3 or 4 hours is enough to get you started. And I can tell you, it feels great. It's like going over a waterfall in your kayak. You're kind of not sure what's down there. You've checked it out, but when you're in the air, there's really nothing you can do until you hit the bottom.
So let's say that I've contacted you, I've done your quiz, you've kind of evaluated me on where I'm at and everything, and I want to get some kind of either to shadow you or you shadow me or something online, or do you do anything like that? What comes next?
Well, one of the best tools that I like to encourage people to use is online poker. Now, we can have a long discussion about, is online poker easier or harder to beat? In a lot of regards, it is harder to win online poker. The players, I think, are better, but there's also a lot of other things going on. They're using these heads-up displays to give them, data and information on their players. And in a lot of ways, what those heads-up displays and, I guess, technological aids do is they begin to level the playing field. It's kind of like if I've got a golfer that's shooting 75 and a golfer that's shooting 95, and we give them the latest, greatest technology that's an incredible upgrade from their current technology, it's going to help the golfer that's shooting 75 maybe shoot 72. But it's going to help the golfer shooting 95 shoot 85. So it helps the bad player more. The good player is better able to use it, but it closes the gap. And I think that's a big reason why online poker is so much harder. But what online poker does is it gives you an opportunity to learn more of the technical components of the game. I tell a lot of my students that the best place to learn is to go play heads up, sit and goes. And here's the main reason. If you're playing in a full ring game, whether it's live or online, you're getting, 30 hands live an hour, maybe 50 hands live an hour. If you're seeing 10 or 15% of those flops, you're seeing 5 to 10, 8 flops an hour. And you're playing those flops and you're getting that practice. If you're playing heads up poker online, you're playing 200 hands an hour and you're seeing 80% of those flops. So you're seeing, the multiple is incredibly larger as far as how many hands you're seeing. And you're also playing bad cards, and it teaches you how to essentially not play your cards but play the action of your opponents. A lot of times I say, when they check, you bet. When they limp, you raise. When they make significant action, Then what you want to do is reassess your situation and either get in their way and play for value, or most of the time you're just going to fold. And online poker, particularly heads up sit and goes, will help a person, really improve. An analogy I give is tennis players. If I had two tennis players and I had them both getting, let's say they're athletically equal, and they both get a lesson from a top pro for 3 hours, and then the pro says, all right, you go both practice for 10 hours this week. And player one, he says, all I want you to do is go play pickup games with whoever you can find on the tennis court. And the other player, he says, I want you to go hit tennis balls against the practice wall for 7 hours and play 3 hours of pickup games. Who do you think is going to have a better chance of winning when those two players come back to meet again? And who's had more practice? And it's going to be the player who went and hit against the wall, because he's hit thousands of more shots. He didn't have to run around picking up tennis balls after each point. And he got a little bit of practice playing against opponents. And the same thing happens when you're playing heads-up poker. When you play hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hands more, in a session, when you go back and play in a full ring game, you're going to run circles around your opponents. Now, some folks will say, the ring game's different because it's 9 opponents. But the main difference is between the heads-up game and the full ring game is in the full ring game, you're better able to guess your opponent's hand range because they're more selective in the cards that they play. But your ability to have this comfort of playing against their action is improved exponentially from that practice you get heads up. And a lot of times what I'll do is sweat people, whether it's in a live game or online, and watch them play. I don't help them while they're actually playing because that would not really be ethical, but I do sweat them, and then we can sit down and review those hands and talk about how they could have played it differently.
Yeah, on my playlist up on YouTube, if anybody goes there, Al Spath, and you can subscribe. I got 150 videos up there, and if you go into the heads up tournaments, just as Gene mentioned, I've got at least 12 or 15 of them. Watch me play people. But the biggest takeaway that I can give anybody out there that hasn't played heads up before or plays at a table, remember, when you're playing at a big table, whether it be a 6-player online or you're playing a 9-player live or 10-player live, you're trying to get the hand heads up. You really are trying to get it down to 1 or 2 players because you stand a better chance of your hand holding up. So when you play heads up, the one thing I want you to keep in mind is if your opponent checks, bet.
Yes.
It's like raising a white flag. Unless they're very tricky, unless they've got some mad skills, when they check, they're giving up on the hand. Anytime that a person gives up on a hand, it's your job to take advantage of that situation and take their money. You cannot let it sit on the table and give them a chance to come back and take it from you. If you don't do it, you're not doing your job and you're making a mistake. So please, look for the signs at the table. If someone's not interested, when I'm playing live and I look around the table and I can see people and I'm watching them and they're just not interested in the hand and it gets to me, I'm betting whether I have nothing. I'm just making the right bet to make sure that they don't get interested in the hand. And I'm taking that money.
Absolutely. And practicing that at heads up just prepares you incredibly well for when you're in that heads up situation in a full ring game. And then you've got the added information of the hand range that's going to be much more selective in a 9 or 10-handed game. And you literally run circles around those players. There's so many other aspects that teach you. Like one of the things I tell my students, when you're playing heads up, you'll know immediately. This is one of the other benefits of playing heads up, and I recommend sit and goes, because if you play heads up cash games, you'll get creamed by the rake because every pot's getting raked.
That's right.
So play sit and goes.
True.
And just start out playing $1, $5, real small ones, just for the practice of it. And you'll find that you very quickly can essentially interpret the player, the opponent you're up against. Are they good or are they bad? If they're limping on the button and trying to make flops, they're not probably a very good player. If they're raising and playing aggressively, well, they're a better player. But after 50 hands, you'll have a pretty good idea. And if you run into a really good player that you might not be better than, then you can maybe go into one of these more game theory optimal modes, GTO, and essentially try to play that player even. But it's the players that you find that are clearly making errors that you're not making, like not playing for bigger pots when they're on the button. If they're limping on the button and you're raising, then you're playing for pots that are twice the size than the pots they're playing for when you're on the button. and you all win way more money in late position than you win in early position. If you measure your hourly win rate from each seat, it goes up exponentially from the early seats to the button. So if you're playing for bigger pots from the late seats, you win more money. So those are some of the kind of the macro things that the game will teach you.
I will tell you also, folks, that if you're playing heads up with somebody, don't get into a rut early in the first, let's say, 10 hands when the limits are very low. Do not try to classify your opponent right then and there. Take note of how they play, but understand when the limits go up 2 or 3 levels, all of a sudden start looking for a pattern change. This is
Yes.
very critical to you because some people will play a little bit looser early on because they got relationship with their stack size to the limit size of the blinds. They're going to splash around a little bit more, but then they're going to tighten up. Some tighten up so much that you can run over them after 3 or 4 rounds. So if you can get past those early rounds, maybe trap a little bit, feel them out, then you're going to make your move. Don't try to make that move in the first 10 minutes sometimes because you're going to get yourself in a jam. I just caution you out there because I see it so many times at Heads Up that people just try to put people into a hole right from the beginning, and then they don't realize everything changes as the dynamics change in the event.
Absolutely, absolutely. Al, I see a couple posts here on the
Oh, you got in there.
on
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
oh yeah, I see. I can see the chat. My window is spinning. It's been refreshing for about 40 minutes now, so we'll leave that alone.
Okay, so I
But
got one also here that says, I will say you're tight. I got one that says you're loose. I got one that says you're loose aggressive. One that says loose aggro. I got one is solid aggressive, in parentheses tight aggressive, and when he plays, he's putting pressure on the field by 3 and 4 betting. I got one that says tight aggressive, and one that says after he said trust yourself, I find reason to fold. Sounds like a tight aggressive. We have one person that says he likes helicopters, rafting, adrenaline junkie, so he's a maniac.
I'm not a maniac. I
So
may look like one.
anyhow, that's it for right now. So tell everybody what style are you and who got it right.
I don't want to do that. Then they'll be able to play against me.
Come on,
No,
come on.
I'm just kidding. A lot of it depends on the game I'm in. I'm not any one particular style. I'm the style that's best suited for the game that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm playing in a tight game, I'm fairly loose aggressive, because I'm able to make people fold by putting pressure on them. If I'm playing opponents that raise and only bet when they hit the flop, I'm betting almost all the time they check. If I'm playing opponents that c-bet all the time, I'm going to float them a lot and make them bet the turn. It's so important to bet the turn when you c-bet the flop. If I'm in a game that's really loose and aggressive, I can play like a nit, because I realize that I can't play loose aggressive in a game and make those players fold, because I'm going to have to rely on hand value. That's one of the things that happened when I was playing in Baltimore at the Horseshoe. Those games have an amazing amount of gamble in them. And the right strategy in that game is to play super, super tight, but charge your opponents massive amounts of money to see the flop and to catch their draws. So in those games, I would play super tight and super aggressive. In general, if I was to give myself one label, I would say that I'm tight aggressive, and I'm a little tricky. I tend to not do what's expected in a certain situation. I'm watching for a lot of tells at the table, not how somebody's eye twitches, but I'm watching for how they stack their chips, how they put their chips in, bet sizing tells, frequencies that players see bet the flop and then bet the turn. And I'm trying to keep track of how often each particular player acts with certain frequencies and play against those tendencies. Generally, I would say I play tight so that I have the ability to bluff and get away with that. Sometimes I'll be in a game for a while and somebody will, when I come into a pot, they're like, holy cow, this is the first hand you've played in 30 minutes. I'm nervous as heck that you've definitely got something, and I might not have anything. So it varies, but generally tight aggressive would be more of the default line. Now, when I play tournaments, I'm a maniac. And part of the reason is that you have to win all the chips in a tournament to win. It's like turning a $500 buy-in in a cash game in a 2-5 game into $10,000 in one evening. That it's nearly impossible to do that, but that's what you have to do when you're in a tournament. And you cannot win tournaments by waiting to play good cards. At least that's my opinion. So in a tournament, if you're playing against me, I will be hyper aggressive from the first hand. In tournaments, as the field gets eliminated, usually what happens is all the bad players are getting eliminated. So if you're playing tight and you're waiting for great cards or a spot to figure out who's who later in the tournament, all the bad players are gone. So early in the tournament, that's when the bad players are in. And even if the blinds are 10 and 20 or 25 and 50, I'm trying to play for stacks. I want to play for $10,000 even when the blinds are 25-50, because once we get deeper and I'm against all the really good opponents, I want to have 2 or 3 times the average chip stack so I can put people all in at will, and I can't get eliminated, but they can, and I can use that pressure to move myself to the final table. The most frustrating thing is playing really, really tight tournaments and going out on the bubble because you didn't gamble enough.
That's good information. And by the way, for those of you that went over to Poker God Z Gear and check that out, the winner of the hat is Rob Gag. Rob Gag is the winner of the hat from PokerGodZGear.com. So Rob, if you would email me your address, I'll forward that on to Dave Summers and we'll get that hat out. We'll need to know the size. I don't know if it's a one size fits all. And I know you're a big thick-headed guy. You told me that yourself, being a former cop. So Mr. Thickhead will need your size just in case. And then it looks like Ticketman for You Too was the first one to get it right on Gene's style. You know, Gene says he adapts to the table, but he's mostly a tight, aggressive player. So Ticketman for You win the Kindle book from Gene, Poker Knows. And to get that out to you, Gene's going to need your email address and some other information. So if you'll pass that on to me, I'll get that to Gene, please. Or if you want to contact Gene, it's gene@pokerhoodie.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
and go ahead and I guess they could type that in the chat box as well or contact you. All I need is your email. And somebody also asked, oh, I see, Ticketman for You, William Hall, my unknown cousin. Okay. I'm wondering if that's his name. But yes, and somebody asked, will I sign it? Of course, these will all be signed copies of the book.
Super. We have one more book to give away, and we're going to give that at the bottom of this session here. And we got one big last question for Gene that we're going to attempt to answer right here is, I'm coming to Vegas next week, hypothetically, and I want a lesson from Gene Hull while I'm in Vegas. How do I go about securing that, Gene?
Send me an email. Happy to do it. I can come and meet you at the casino. Or we can set up a time at the new salon in the back. We've got a great space for that, and I charge $60 an hour. I advertise $100, but I discount that for folks that are coming in through chat groups or particularly folks that are involved in a poker discussion group. I think being involved in a group like the Wednesday Poker Discussion Group are tremendous. Just to I see one of your followers. What is it you have to do to stay creative and use your imagination?
Mm-hmm.
You have to find people with different opinions, find new things to do. In some regards, leap before you look once in a while and figure it out on the way down. You want to do that with some caution, but take yourself out of your comfort zone. One of the things I advertise with students who want to move up in stakes, let's say somebody's playing 1-2 and they want to play 2-5.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just go play 2-5. Go the next time you're going to go play for 5 hours, go play 2-5 for 1 hour and then drop down to 1-2. That way you get a taste of it. You also know that after 60 minutes you get to get out of the ring, so to speak, with all the big boys and the big girls. But getting yourself out of the comfort zone, whether that's moving up in stakes for an hour, taking up a new hobby. I know everybody's got something they've always wanted to do. When folks ask me how I invented the poker hoodie, I tell them, I did the same thing you did. I had a great idea, but then I decided to do something with it. And I had to get a little bit out of my comfort zone to do that. So the next time you get a great idea, some of our listeners out there, write it down. And then when you get a list of 5 great ideas, pick one and do something with it.
Act on it.
Don't,
Act on it.
act on it.
Yes. Absolutely. Look, Ticketman for you at AOL.com. That's the one. And Rob Gagg, he's not on here right now, but I'll get his from later on. That's great. Somebody asked about the hair salon. You probably were late, but Gene's girlfriend has just opened up a new hair salon, and it's called what, Gene?
It's called Hair Cosmos.
Hair Cosmos on
It's
Rainbow.
not my first business, but it's the first time I've been in the hair business, and I love it. I'm learning. I'm not going to be cutting hair and getting my license, but I love learning all the new stuff I have to learn. And the one thing I have learned is the best marketing is a great product. It's not advertising. You need great stylists, people that love their customers and make them feel like $1,000,000, both from a great haircut and a good attitude.
Well, listen, guys, you don't go to the hair salon saying that where is the back room poker game? But you can contact Gene and say, I want to come there for a lesson in the back room, because he says he has one available, folks. So I don't want to mislead anybody. There's no illegal back game going on in the hair salon.
Not at all.
It's not a front, but he's going to take advantage of the space that he has there to work with clients that are coming to town, or at the tables over at, he might observe you, I guess, at the tables in a game live. So you guys want to contact him. It's Gene at PokerHoodie.com. And Gene, I'm going to let you pick somebody's name out on the list. You're looking at the list there for the other book. I'll just let you pick one out by random, and that will give away the 2 books today. And we really appreciate that. And also the hat from PokerGodsZGear.com.
Okay, let's see. Somebody says, what's a Kindle? Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. I'm gonna, you know who? Because he's got the name Noodle the River. He's gonna get a free book. So
Noodle
if you're still
the
listening,
River is a winner.
I love the river.
Noodle.
You know, I'm a river guy.
All right, he's a river man. He knows there's banks
So
in
let's
rivers.
do it. So
Great.
Noodle the River, put your. He guessed I was a nit. Oh, he says loose. Then he says knit. He's well. He's good because he's guessed who I could be at any different game.
All right, Noodle, you win that. Mark Curry, you win that one. That's pretty cool. And listen, everybody, Gene is available out there in Vegas and online as well. So you guys got to hook him up and send some folks his way. And if you need any assistance, he's there to help you. And Gene and I think we're going to stay in touch. I think Alan set us up, and I think we became friends instantly. And I hope that we have some kind of partnership moving forward, and that we coach, and maybe I can send him a few players that I can't handle at one time, because sometimes I get overwhelmed, and whatever the case may be. But we'll keep talking about different things. And Gene, I really appreciate you taking time to be here on Heartbeat Poker on Twitch TV, and those that are listening on my YouTube channel, go to Heartbeat Poker and follow right there. And Gene, I'm going to see you real soon when you come to Baltimore or I come to Vegas.
Thanks, Al. It's been a great time, and I know we could go on forever, but we've got to cut it at some point. So thanks for having me. Thanks for the listeners for the great questions, and I'll get those books right out. We still need Noodle the River's email, so make sure you either post that in the chat or send that to my email, Gene at PokerHoodie.com, and we'll get those books out to you guys.
Very well. Thanks from near Baltimore, where we got 30 inches of snow, and enjoy your sun out there in Vegas today.
We will, Al. Have a great day.
Talk to you real soon. Bye now. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Gene.